A family, desperate for a fresh start, found their way to a secluded mansion on the outskirts of a forgotten town. The mansion, though imposing, had a certain charm. Its walls whispered stories of old memories, hidden secrets, and unspoken regrets. But what stood out the most was the garden. Wild and untamed, yet undeniably beautiful in its own eerie way. Overgrown vines crept along the crumbling stone walls, and ancient trees towered above, their twisted branches reaching toward the heavens. The air carried the smell of damp earth, and the sun barely peeked through the thick layers of fog that seemed to linger around the property. The family was instantly captivated, but had no idea that their dream home would soon become a nightmare. It was an odd thing. Every evening, when the sun dipped below the horizon, the garden would be impeccably maintained. The flowers trimmed to perfection, the weeds uprooted, the paths swept clean. No one ever saw the gardener, yet the work was always done. The family noticed it right away, but each day it continued. They grew more and more unsettled. Who was tending the garden? Why did it always seem so perfect? The eerie feeling began to creep in like the slow, relentless spread of an illness. Still, they shrugged it off as the work of some invisible caretaker, a resident ghost of the house perhaps. But something was off. Something was very wrong. The family grew restless, and they began to investigate. Old town records revealed a chilling truth. There was once a caretaker who had lived in the mansion decades ago. A man, quiet and reclusive, who had mysteriously disappeared after a tragic accident in the very garden he loved. Whispers from the townspeople suggested that the man had died in a fall, his body never recovered, and his soul never allowed to rest. The family's curiosity grew. They learned that the caretaker's disappearance was surrounded by rumors of dark forces, perhaps even an unnatural attachment to the land. But it didn't stop there. Soon, they began to hear faint whispers in the garden, soft murmurs carried by the wind, like someone calling out in agony. Then came the sightings. They saw him, but only for a split second. A shadow flitting between the trees, a figure bending low to trim a bush, always just beyond their reach. One evening, as the family watched from their window, the figure appeared. It was unmistakably him, the old caretaker, hunched over and working diligently in the garden. The family's breath caught in their throats. They rushed outside, eager to confront him, but as they neared, he vanished into thin air. No trace of him remained, save for the perfectly trimmed bushes and freshly swept paths. They called out to him, but the air was silent. The garden was still. The figure, however, never truly left. As they walked deeper into the garden, they began to feel his presence, watching them from the shadows, lingering in the cool evening breeze. It was as if the gardener was more than just a ghost. He was part of the land itself, tethered to it by some unholy force. The family learned the truth in the most horrifying way. The gardener wasn't merely a ghost. He was the guardian of the garden, cursed to tend to it for eternity. His spirit, bound to the land after his tragic death, awaited a new soul to take his place. Someone who would continue the cycle. As the family members began to unravel the mystery, they realized they were the next victims, destined to join the caretaker in his eternal labor. The garden, once a symbol of beauty, had become a prison, its flowers now holding the souls of those who could not escape. And as they turned to run, the garden began to grow darker, the vines creeping toward them as if to drag them into the earth. The cycle was complete. The gardener had found his new caretakers. It was a night like any other, when a young woman found herself stranded at an empty, desolate train station. She had missed her last connection, and her phone had no signal. The fog rolled in thick and fast, swallowing the tracks, the station, and even the stars above. She paced the empty platform, the sound of her footsteps echoing into the void. The station, it seemed, had been abandoned for years. Just as she thought she would be forced to wait until morning, she heard the low, distant rumble of a train. The train was already approaching, its headlights cutting through the fog like a ghostly beacon. The only other sound was the eerie screech of the train's wheels on the tracks. She felt both relieved and uneasy as she boarded the train. Inside the train, the air was stale and the silence unsettling. The young woman sat alone, or so she thought. Across from her, an old man sat, his face hidden in the shadows of his tattered hat. He was dressed in old-fashioned clothing, and his eyes gleamed with an unsettling intensity. As the train jolted forward, the landscape outside blurred into nothingness, swallowed by an endless sea of fog. The woman attempted small talk, but the man simply nodded, his eyes never leaving her face. His silence was more oppressive than any conversation could have been. He didn't belong here. She didn't belong here. And yet, there they were, together on this endless journey to nowhere. As the train sped through the endless fog, it began to stop at strange, eerie stations. The young woman could see figures standing on the platforms, silhouettes of people, their faces blurred and vacant. They seemed to appear for only a moment, just long enough for her to notice, and then they vanished as the train moved on. Each stop felt like an eternity, though time itself seemed to stand still. There was no way to explain what she was seeing. The figures on the platforms weren't real. At least, that's what she kept telling herself. But deep inside, she knew something was terribly wrong. It wasn't until the old man spoke that the truth began to dawn. He revealed that the train was cursed, trapped in an endless loop. Passengers who boarded never reached their destinations. They were doomed to ride the train forever, caught between life and death. The young woman's heart raced. She was trapped. There was no escape. The train would not stop, and she would never get off. The old man told her that the only way out was to make a choice: remain on the train, condemned to eternity, or leave the train and risk becoming part of the cursed souls lost to it forever. She could feel the weight of her decision pressing down on her. Would she risk everything and leave the train knowing the consequences? Or would she stay, condemned to this endless journey? The train continued its motion, the fog closing in around her. In the end, there was only one truth. Every soul on this train had a story, and every passenger was bound to its curse. But not all stories were meant to be told. Not all journeys were meant to be completed, destined to join the caretaker in his eternal labor. The garden, once a symbol of beauty, had become a prison, its flowers now holding the souls of those who could not escape. And as they turned to run, the garden began to grow darker, the vines creeping toward them as if to drag them into the earth. The cycle was complete. The gardener had found his new caretakers. Thank you so much for watching today's stories. From the eerie, cursed gardener in The Phantom Gardener to the chilling, endless journey in The Last Train to Nowhere, we hope you felt the spine-tingling suspense as much as we did telling them. If you enjoyed these tales, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that will leave you questioning what's real and what's not. Drop a comment below with your thoughts or any stories you'd love to hear next, and make sure to share this video with anyone who loves a good mystery. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your mind sharp. You never know when a shadow may be closer than you think. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss out on the next chilling adventure.